welcome to Quid Pro Quo. I'm Rin.
And I'm Zac.
And today we are talking about the Save the Cat framework. So this is probably, I will admit, this is one of my favorite plot structures to use, and I'll go into more about why it's my favorite. But also, we are going to acknowledge why it is slowly losing its golden child spot in my brain, because it's not fitting for everything I need to do these days. So, what is Save the Cat, Zac?
Oh, good question. So, Save the Cat is a title of a book that was written by a gentleman by the name of Blake Snyder, which was originally designed to help screenwriters structure their screenplays, specifically for feature films. So we're talking about things that you would go to the theater to sit down and watch inside of one of those super comfy chairs where you recline and then you fall asleep and then you miss all the movie. This framework was adapted by Jessica Brody for novel structure, and Save the Cat writes a novel. But the beats are basically the same. Save the Cat is a little bit different from the other structures that we talked about, where the other structures give us kind of like broad strokes of what's supposed to be going on. Whereas Save the Cat is like, here are 15 beats that you use for the skeleton of your story. So you can almost think of it as like, here's a ready-made outline for you to fill in the blanks for. In the original Save the Cat book, specifically talking about screenplays, Snyder had page counts for where the beats were supposed to go, assuming that a feature film was 120 pages. The reason why he assumed 120 pages is because in screenwriting, one page is about equal to 1 minute of screen time. So if your film is going to be 2 hours long, then the beats were supposed to show up at certain points inside of the screenplay. So with that kind of background about what we're talking about here, let us dive into the beats. There are 15 of them. We're going to use a combination of the 3-act structure / Freytag's pyramid and the hero's journey in order to describe what is going on during each of these beats. And hopefully you sense, as we're going through all of this, that structure is all connected. The different structures don't stand by themselves. They inform one another. And by mastering them, you can do interesting things with your structure and still write a really good book.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Save the Cat is also divided into 3 acts, like the 3-act structure. But in these acts, there's multiple beats, and I think they're each roughly 5 beats.
Act 3 is a little bit shorter, but yeah.
Yeah. So, Act 1 is split up into 5 beats, with one being kind of a background beat, whereas the first is the opening image. The second is the theme of the story. Third is the background. It's like setting the scene. And the fourth is inciting incident. And fifth beat is like refusal of the call, or the debate is what Jessica Brody calls it. One reason why I love Save the Cat so much is in Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which is the version of the story or the beat sheet I've read, if she has these percentages at about which, like Zac talked about, like there's the page numbers in a screenplay. Mm-hmm. You can do the same thing with percentage of word count in your novel. And let me tell you, I just joked that I couldn't do math. I love numbers. I love spreadsheets. I think they're so fun. And I love figuring out how many words I have to write to make my goal work.
Yeah, that's a really big draw to Save the Cat, is because it can help you to pace yourself of like, oh, when are these things supposed to happen? Because I know for me, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, more words. And then I'm at like, 50,000 words inside of a 70,000 word novel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't hit the midpoint yet. Like, we're in trouble.
Yeah, that's rough. It's just like that one meme from Avatar, Sokka telling Zuko, that's rough, buddy.
Yep, that's rough, buddy.
I'm like not an overwriter. I am chronically an underwriter, so I'm always like adding words in my second drafts. So I'm like, I've never been at 50,000 words and not hit the midpoint. Never ever in my life. But anyways, the refusal of the call from Hero's Journey, the debate in Save the Cat is also sequel beat in Lisa Cron's Story Genius. It's all the same thing. There's no one ring to rule them all.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Then Zach, do you want to do transition into 2 and 2?
Sure. So the 6th beat inside of the 15 beat structure for Save the Cat is the transition into 2. So this is when the main character gets over the refusal of the call and decides to go for it. So then Act 2 covers beats 7 through 12. And at the very beginning of Act 2 is when Snyder and Brody recommend introducing the subplot. In a lot of fiction, this is the romance subplot. But you can pick lots of things here. You don't have to have a romance subplot if you don't want one. We did an episode all about subplots way, way back in episode 28. So if you want to go learn more about subplots, you should definitely go and check that out. In beat 8, I believe in both versions, both the screenplay and the novel writing, this is called the fun and games portion. So this is where the main character is exploring the unknown world. I recently watched Bedtime Stories with Adam Sandler, and the fun and games portion of the story is when Adam Sandler's character is discovering the kinds of things that he can get away with putting into these bedtime stories in order for them to happen inside of his life. So, you have fun encounters where scenes from like a Western are being played out inside of his own life. So it's meant to, in Save the Cat, Snyder says that a lot of what goes into the trailer is coming from this portion right here. And this is what the audience often came to see, and what they're expecting to see is the fun and games portion. After that fun and games portion, you're going to have the midpoint, just like we talked about last week. This is sometimes called a false victory or a false defeat, but it's some kind of reversal that ends fun and games and brings us to the pinch point, which is also called the enemies close in, or the villains close in, where the
bad
pressure
guys close in.
Yeah, where the pressure is mounting on the character. And then, borrowing from the hero's journey, beats 11 and 12 are the abyss portion. 11 is the scene where the character enters the abyss, and then beat 12 is where the character responds to coming into the abyss. So I believe these are called All is Lost and Dark Night of the Soul. So All is Lost is the scene where it happens. Dark Night of the Soul is where the character is responding to it. The moment that this reminds me of is from the first Spider-Man movie, where he's like crushed underneath all the rubble of the buildings. That's Spider-Man's Dark Night of the Soul. Is, where he enters the abyss, he's all by himself, the building drops on top of him, and he realizes, I can't do this. Or, that's the kind of, that's his self-talk at the time, is I can't do this. But then in beat 13, we transition from Act 2 to Act 3. So this is the break into 3.
Yeah, so the break into 3 happens, and then you have the finale. And one thing I think we didn't clarify well enough is the beats are not all equal percentages. Like that beat 7 with fun and games is like 20 or 30% of the novel.
Yeah.
Likewise, this finale beat is like 20% of the novel. And then 15 is the closing image or the final image, which mirrors the opening image, which I think is a very powerful tool. That's one of the reasons why I like Save the Cat, is because it varies, like your beginning and end should mirror each other. They should be mirror images, but different. So I think that's just a nice little touch. I was doing some book coaching with a client a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about story structure, and I was like explaining Save the Cat, and she's like, oh, this one is so perfect for my novel, because like at the beginning the main character's alone, and at the end she has all her friends. And I'm like, yeah, you get it. And it's like, it's the same thing but mirrored. It's a mirror image, even if it's not superimposable mirror image. If you want to get into like chirality and all that, like
left hand, right hand, yeah.
Left hand, right hand, exactly. You're going left hand, right hand, which are mirror images, but you cannot superimpose them on each other. You don't have the videos, you can't see me doing the hand motions.
But let's talk about pros and cons of Save the Cat. Rin, talk us through what you really love about Save the Cat. You've mentioned some of it before, but walk us through it.
Yeah, so I love the word counts, the percentages. I think it's so fun to like see how my story fits into it. I think that it's really good for pacing. Like when my friends are struggling with pacing in their novels, I look at Save the Cat and I'm like, okay, even if you're not perfectly following the structure, where are you like, where do you not have enough and where do you have too much?
Yeah. I think that Save the Cat is a really good set of training wheels to help you master story structure because it gives you a lot of input into how the structure is supposed to work. So you don't have to, you're not kind of left in the abyss of the second act, like in Freytag's Pyramid, where it's like, what's supposed to happen here? Because the second act is broken up in so many different pieces inside of Save the Cat that it makes it a little bit easier to tackle. And it incorporates a lot of the other structures or ideas that we've talked about in prior stuff. We've been harkening back to the 4-act structure, the 3-act structure, the hero's journey. There are lots of elements of it inside of this structure. It's all packaged together.
Yeah. On to the cons. We already talked a little bit about how it sets you up to fail the middle because there's not a lot of direction around that. It is more for screenwriting than noveling. That's something that I think we've been very clear about as well. And I recently heard the comparison. I think it was on TikTok. I couldn't tell you who said it, but they were like, Save the Cat is for movies. You need like a Save the Cat for TV shows if you want to do a novel, because novels have downtime and you're not allowed to have downtime on screen in most movies. Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting comparison. Oh my god, we are like coming up on time and I have another call to get into, but like word count versus word volume is like you can have lots of words and not like say a lot, or you can very few words and say way more. Like if you can say something in 12 words, cool. If you can say the same thing in 7, you have greater volume in those words. And it's going to be a more effective story from like a higher word volume, lower word count. So if you look at like Hemingway, he has a very high word volume and a low word count. Whereas like Dickens, high word count. He's getting paid by the word. He's putting all the words on the page.
Yeah.
So yeah. And
I think that plays into one of the comments that I had, which is that because people have different word volumes, you're like the spot where each of these beats is going to move a little bit. So yes. in the capital Z discourse on the interwebs, in screenwriting, when you're like pitching your manuscript to gatekeepers, gatekeepers can sometimes be suspicious if your script lines up too well with the beats in Save the Cat. So if they notice that your midpoint is happening exactly on page 60, that's something that kind of sends up the red flag, because it signals to them that there is some kind of formula being followed here. I have no information about if agents are concerned about that or if editors are concerned about that as well, but it is something to be aware of, that because it provides a lot of structure for you, if you follow it too rigidly, for people who are on the in, they can tell what you're doing.
Yeah. I would also say now that you're aware of this, and if you study too much of it, you will start seeing in everything you do, and movies will start and books will start to get boring. Like, if they are also following the Save the Cat, then you're going to be able to predict everything that happens by like 15 or 20%. This happens to me with almost every Marvel movie now. It is just like, I know exactly what's going to happen the whole movie, and I'm so bored the entire movie. So, beware. Try and find joy in it anyways, because they are still good stories, even if they are formulaic. So, yeah. That's all I've got for this week. Do you have anything else, Zach?
No. We've had a really great run with these past 3 weeks talking about all of these story structures and how they mesh together. We're going to have a new batch of story structures coming up to talk to you all about real soon. Until then, thank you for joining us here on Quid Pros Quo, and we'll see you next week.
Quid Pros Quo is hosted by DC Winters and CK Jensen. If you like this episode, be sure to leave us a rating. And if you'd like to contact us, you can email us at quidprosquo@gmail.com. For more episodes, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts.